I never thought a single sentence could shatter everything you believe in. But that night, Ariana said it. Love can't pay the bills. Julian. I was standing in our small kitchen, the dim light from the ceiling barely touching the edges of the room. The rain outside drummed softly against the window, a quiet rhythm that usually soothed me. But now, it felt like a heartbeat of truth I wasn't ready to face. I had cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just a simple meal I knew she liked. I had wanted it to be special, a small gesture of love, a proof that my heart mattered more than my wallet. She didn't smile. She didn't taste the food or even ask about my day. Instead, she looked around our tiny apartment, eyes lingering on the cracks in the wall, the old sofa, the chipped tiles. Every glance was a silent reminder that I wasn't enough. Not for her, not for the life she imagined. I wanted to speak, to tell her that love isn't measured in money, that it can't be counted in bills or banknotes. But the words stuck in my throat. They always do when the heart is full and the mind is defeated. I remember standing there in silence, watching her toss the fork onto her plate, the clatter loud in the quiet room. Something inside me broke that night. Not entirely, but a part of the dream I had for us quietly crumbled. And yet, I couldn't stop loving her. I couldn't stop hoping. Little did I know, someone had already noticed. Someone who had seen every step I had taken, every decision, every sacrifice. My father, Mr. Charles, a man of immense wealth and quiet authority, was already aware of what had happened. He had been watching not to judge me, but to see her true colors. That night, as I lay awake listening to the rain, I realized love alone might not save us. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the first stirrings of a quiet, patient reckoning. My name is Julian, and I grew up knowing the value of hard work, humility, and quiet dreams. Life never handed me luxuries. Every small comfort I had was earned, often with sweat, sometimes with sleepless nights. I lived modestly, but I had a heart full of hope, and a belief that honesty and kindness were worth more than gold. Ariana, she was different. From the moment I met her, I was captivated by her elegance, the way she carried herself, the effortless charm that seemed to bend the world toward her. She came from a world I had only glimpsed in magazines' mansions, designer dresses, extravagant dinners, and a sense of entitlement wrapped in beauty. At first, I thought I could bridge the gap between our worlds. I believed that love, sincerity, and devotion could make even the impossible feel close enough to touch. We met at a small cafe one rainy afternoon. I remember the smell of freshly baked bread, the coffee steam curling like little clouds around her fingers. She smiled at me, a fleeting, perfect curve that made my chest ache. I knew then I wanted to be near her, to make her world brighter, even if my own world was dim by comparison. At first, everything seemed easy, even magical. We laughed at small things, walked through cobbled streets, hand in hand, shared secrets in whispers over candlelight dinners. I thought I saw a side of her that loved not what I had, but what I was: my heart, my dreams, my quiet joy. But the cracks were always there. I noticed them in small moments: a glance at a designer bag she couldn't have, a sigh when I mentioned my paycheck, a subtle disappointment when I couldn't afford the latest luxury. I tried to overlook them, convincing myself that love was enough, that her occasional discontent didn't matter because our hearts were aligned. Then there was my father, Mr. Charles, a man of few words and immense wealth. He had built an empire that seemed untouchable. To many, he was distant, cold, even unapproachable, but to me, he was a quiet guardian. He didn't flaunt his money. He didn't boast or demand. But he had a way of observing life, of seeing the truth behind every smile and gesture. I had grown up under his subtle guidance, learning lessons about patience, discretion, and integrity, though I didn't always realize it at the time. Our worlds collided fully the day I decided to introduce Ariana to my father. I was nervous, excited, and secretly proud. I wanted him to see the woman I loved, to bless our relationship, even if our lives were so different. Mr. Charles welcomed us graciously, as he always did, polite and composed, but his eyes lingered on her a little longer than most would, quietly measuring her intent. I didn't know then, but that look carried the weight of silent judgment. Ariana, on the other hand, seemed uneasy. She admired the grandeur of my father's mansion, the polished floors, the glittering chandeliers, the way servants moved quietly like shadows. But there was no warmth in her gaze toward the man whose son she claimed to love. Instead, I noticed curiosity, calculation, and a subtle expectationing, unspoken thought of what he could provide rather than who I was. I tried not to see it. I wanted to believe that her beauty and charm were enough to carry genuine love, that her occasional glances at material things were harmless. I clung to that belief because giving it up would have meant admitting that perhaps she didn't love me in the way I loved her. And yet, deep down, I sensed the first quiet pangs of doubt that would grow into something unavoidable. Love was supposed to be simple, but I began to see it as fragile, tested not by trust or kindness, but by money, status, and expectation. Even then, I didn't know the storm was already gathering. I didn't know that my father had already seen the seeds of her priorities, the way her heart would weigh wealth over devotion. And I certainly didn't know that this storm would change everything: my love, my pride, and the life I thought we were building together. Life, I soon realized, was not about grand declarations of love. It was about the small, everyday truths that reveal a person's heart. And those truths, they started to cut deeper than I ever expected. Ariana had a way of making me feel both adored and inadequate in the same breath. She would smile at me in public, leaning on my arm as if we were equals, partners in a perfect story. But behind closed doors, the story changed. I noticed the sighs when I told her I couldn't afford a fancy restaurant. I noticed her restless fingers when I counted pennies for groceries. I noticed the polite nods when I suggested small weekend trips to the countryside. Trips, she called, charming but predictable. I tried to understand. I tried to remind myself that we came from different worlds, that patience and love could bridge the gap. I tried to tell myself that her desires were natural, that her upbringing had taught her to expect more. Then came the words I could never forget. One evening, as I nervously fiddled with a small birthday gift, I had bought her a necklace. Simple, but meaningful. She looked at it, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Julian, love can't pay the bills," she said softly, almost casual, like it was an observation about the weather. The words hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. My chest tightened, my hands froze. I wanted to scream, to argue, to tell her that love is enough if hearts are true. But instead, I felt hollow, a quiet ache that settled deep into my bones. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of our modest apartment, listening to the distant hum of the city, the occasional car splashing through puddles outside. I loved her truly, but I realized that love alone wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't enough. And for the first time, I felt like I was losing her, even as I held on with everything I had. Meanwhile, my father, Mr. Charles, had begun to watch more closely. He had always been observant, but now his attention was deliberate. I remember the day he called me to his study, the walls lined with books, the soft leather chairs, the faint scent of aged wood and cigar smoke. "Julian," he said, his voice calm but carrying weight, "do you truly know what she wants?" I swallowed hard. "I think I do, Father. I think she wants stability, comfort, things I can't give her yet." He nodded slowly, not with judgment, but with a quiet certainty. "Sometimes, my son, the heart, sees what it wants clearly, but the mind follows another path. Watch closely, observe. The truth often reveals itself without confrontation." I didn't fully understand his meaning at the time. I only knew that something was shifting, and I had no power to stop it. The tension grew gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Ariana started making subtle suggestions: dinners at high-end restaurants, trips to exotic cities, a sudden interest in my father's business connections. I tried to meet her halfway, but the gap seemed to widen with every passing day. My humble apartment felt smaller, my modest life inadequate under her gaze. Bella, my closest friend, noticed my despair. One evening, over a cup of steaming tea, she said softly, "Julian, she isn't seeing you. She's seeing what you can't give her yet. That's not your failure, but her choice." Her words stung, yet they rang true. I wanted to fight for us, to prove that love could conquer this divide. But every effort I made seemed to emphasize the difference between us, rather than bridge it. Every small gift I gave, every moment of care, every word of affection, it was overshadowed by the world she was used to, the luxury she expected. And then came the social events, the parties, the dinners, where I felt more like an accessory than a partner. Ariana would smile at the right people, laugh at the right jokes, and I would stand quietly by, my own laughter sounding hollow in my ears. I tried to keep my pride intact, tried to tell myself that love was stronger than status. But deep down, I felt the slow erosion of hope. One night, after a particularly uncomfortable dinner at a high-end restaurant, she whispered to me, almost conspiratorially, "Julian, you should think bigger. Life isn't just about dreams and love. You need security, connections, comfort." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that I had everything worth having in my heart. But the words caught in my throat. Her words, soft and persuasive, carried the weight of truth in her world, a world I couldn't touch. Not yet, not without sacrifices I wasn't ready to make. I felt myself shrinking, a quiet despair settling in my chest. I loved her with every fiber of my being, yet her love seemed conditional, measured against a standard I could never reach. I tried to remind myself that Mr. Charles had faith in me, that he had once whispered that life's truths often reveal themselves in time, but the waiting was agony. Ariana's expectations became clearer with every passing day. A new dress, a luxury watch, comments about friends with wealthier husbands. They were subtle, yet piercing. I began to see the cracks more clearly, the way she looked at my father's wealth, the way her eyes lingered on things money could buy rather than moments we could share. And through it all, my father remained quiet, observing, never interfering openly, but somehow orchestrating a balance I didn't yet comprehend. He seemed to know that truth and consequence were more powerful than confrontation. I began to realize that I was part of a test I hadn't agreed to, a test of love, of integrity, and of character. A test that wasn't for me but for her. And as the days turned into weeks, I felt the slow, painful realization settle in. Love alone might not save us. It might never be enough. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs heavy and gray, and every drop tapping against the window feels like a small drumbeat marking the passage of time. I was at work, my thoughts still tangled in Ariana's words. Love can't pay the bills. I couldn't shake them. They echoed through every quiet moment, in the clatter of keyboards, in the hum of the city outside, in the solitude of my small apartment. That evening, Mr. Charles called me to his study. His voice was calm, measured, yet it carried a weight that made my heart tighten. "Julian," he said, "come to me. It's time you saw something." I arrived at the mansion, the familiar scent of polished wood and leather greeting me. The grandeur that once seemed distant now felt oppressive. We entered the study, the quiet hum of the city below muffled by the walls of glass and stone. He gestured for me to sit, and I obeyed, sensing that whatever he was about to show me would change everything. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he handed me a stack of paper statements, bills, invoices, all neatly organized. I looked at them, confused. "They're hers," he said simply. "Ariana's every one of her debts, her purchases, her expenses. They have been cleared." I blinked, unsure I understood. What do you mean?" "My daughter-in-law-to-be," he said quietly, "thought love was not enough. She believed security was worth more than devotion. So I paid her bills, every one of them, but not for her benefit. For yours, so you may see clearly where the heart truly lies." I stared at him, the weight of realization slowly settling in. The soft click of a pen on his desk, the faint hum of the mansion. The muted light from the chandelier, above it all, became a quiet stage for truth. "She has no idea," Mr. Charles continued. "She believes her luxuries come from chance, from some twist of fate, but it is her choices that are now laid bare." I felt a surge of emotional jar, heartbreak, disbelief, but also clarity. Everything that had been a whisper of doubt, every fleeting insecurity, now roared in full clarity. Ariana's priorities were not hidden. They were revealed in the way she measured worth, by wealth, by convenience, by the superficial. Love, my love, had never factored into her equation. Later that night, I saw it firsthand. Ariana called me, her voice light, unaware that her debts had vanished, her financial anxieties resolved. She sounded relieved, almost gleeful, as she mentioned a shopping spree she could now indulge in. She had no idea who had paid for it, who had orchestrated this silent intervention, who had quietly exposed her choices. I watched her from across the room, my heart heavy, yet strangely liberated. I realized that I didn't need to argue, to confront, to beg. The truth had presented itself without my intervention, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the calm of quiet power. Mr. Charles had never intended to humiliate her, nor to punish. He simply allowed reality to speak for itself. And reality had a way of cutting deeper than any argument. I remember sitting in the study afterward, the rain again tapping against the glass, and feeling a slow, steady acceptance. I loved Ariana, yes, but I also saw her clearly, her values, her priorities, her heart, or the lack of understanding of what a heart truly gives. And with that clarity came a strange peace. The following days were subtle but telling. Ariana continued her luxurious lifestyle, unaware of who had funded it. She spoke of debts, of bills, of small frustrations that were no longer hers to bear. I listened quietly, my own response measured, calm, almost invisible. I didn't scold, I didn't demand. I simply observed. And in observing, I realized the true test was not about who loved whom more. The test was about understanding the measure of a person's heart hand. Now, I had seen it. Bella, ever perceptive, noticed the change in me. "Julian, you're different," she said one evening, handing me a warm cup of tea. "You've seen the truth, haven't you?" I nodded, a faint smile brushing my lips. "Yes, Bella, and it's liberating, not in the way I imagined, but in the way that matters. I no longer need to chase illusions. I know what I have, and I know what I don't." Even Ariana's reactions began to reveal themselves. She remained unaware of the source of her newfound comfort, but her words, her tone, her casual disregard for the sacrifices I had made, they all became clearer in the harsh light of truth. Every expectation, every sigh, every sidle demand had been revealed. Mr. Charles never asked me what I intended to do. He simply said, "Let life teach the lessons, Julian. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." And in that silence, I found my path. No confrontation was needed, no dramatic scene, no loud accusations, no tearing of letters or shouting matches. The revelation was quiet, almost imperceptible to her, but absolute. The truth had been paid for literally and figuratively, and it had exposed what mattered most in her heart. That night, as I walked through the quiet streets of Italy, the rain soft against my coat, I understood something essential. Love, however deep, however true, could not force someone to value it. And sometimes the only power a heart has is in recognizing truth, holding steady, and allowing life to unveil what cannot be hidden. Ariana would never realize the full role my father had played. She would never fully grasp the quiet lesson being imparted. But that was the point. Reality, when allowed to speak for itself, carries a weight no argument can match. I felt neither joy nor vengeance, just calm, reflective understanding. And in that understanding, I began to reclaim my peace. The days that followed the revelation were quieter than I expected. Ariana remained blissfully unaware of who had paid her bills, who had orchestrated the subtle test of her heart. She went about her life as usual, indulging in the luxuries she now believed were the result of luck or circumstance. I watched, silently, without anger, without words. It was strangely liberating, even to finally let go of the illusion that I could change her. The love I had carried so passionately was still there, but it no longer bound me to her whims or expectations. I realized that love, to be pure, cannot be conditional on wealth, status, or convenience. It is quiet, patient, and steady, like the soft rhythm of rain against a window. I began to focus on myself. The modest apartment that once felt like a cage now became my sanctuary. Every corner, every familiar scent, every small imperfection reminded me of who I was, not what I lacked, but what I had. A heart capable of deep love, resilience in the face of disappointment, and the strength to let go when necessary. Bella noticed the change immediately. One evening, we sat in my kitchen, cups of tea, warming our hands. She smiled softly. "Julian, you're at peace. I can see it. You've stopped carrying what isn't yours to carry." I nodded, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "Yes, Bella, it's like seeing clearly for the first time. I loved her, but she couldn't love me the way I deserved. And that's not my failure, it's hers. Or perhaps it's just reality showing us both who we are." I thought about Mr. Charles. He had never asked for thanks, never sought acknowledgement. His power wasn't in wealth or influence, it was in his quiet ability to observe, to act subtly, and to allow the truth to reveal itself. Through him, I learned a lesson I would carry forever. The most profound lessons are often unspoken, revealed not through confrontation, but through reflection and consequence. Ariana's visits became infrequent. When she did call, her voice carried the same light, unconcerned tone, but the conversations felt hollow to me now. I listened politely, shared small updates, but I no longer felt the desperation to impress or appease her. The dynamic had shifted not because of anger, not because of revenge, but because I had claimed my own peace. The mansion, the wealth, the extravagant lifestyle. None of it could measure the worth of the heart. I saw it clearly now. Ariana had chosen convenience over connection, luxury over love. And that choice, subtle as it was, defined her. One evening, I returned to Mr. Charles's study, the soft Italian sunset casting warm light across the polished floors. He looked up from a book, his expression calm but knowing. "Julian," he said, "you've learned the quiet strength of truth. Life does not need loud victories. Sometimes it is enough to watch, to wait, and to understand." I nodded. "I think I understand now. Love, real love, cannot be measured by money or comfort, and those who seek only the latter will always miss the former." He smiled faintly, as if approving the thought. "Exactly, and in time, you will see how powerful quiet dignity can be." I left the mansion that evening with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The city lights shimmered against the rain-soaked streets. Each step I took felt lighter, unburdened by illusion, guided instead by clarity and quiet strength. The resolution wasn't dramatic. There were no confrontations, no tears of accusation, no loud arguments. It was a slow, almost imperceptible shift. Ariana remained unaware, living comfortably. Yet the truth had already touched her life in ways she could not yet perceive. And I, free from the weight of unmet expectations, embraced my own life fully. I reconnected with my passions, my small circle of friends, and the little moments that mattered: Bella's laughter over tea, the scent of fresh bread in the morning, the quiet rhythm of the rain on the rooftops. I realized that wealth can buy many things, but it cannot buy character, sincerity, or the steady warmth of a heart that truly loves. Through this experience, I found forgiveness, not for her, not for the choices she had made, but for myself, for the love I gave, for the patience I showed, and for the courage to let go. Forgiveness brought peace. Peace brought clarity. And clarity brought strength. I often think back to that rainy night when Ariana first told me, "Love can't pay the bills." At the time, it felt like a wound too deep to heal, a truth too sharp to bear. I thought it marked the end of everything I had dreamed of with her. But now, looking back, I see it differently. That night didn't end my story, it quietly began another, one I never could have imagined. I learned that love, in its purest form, isn't loud or demanding. It doesn't need applause, it doesn't ask for recognition, and it doesn't bend to expectations of wealth or status. Real love is steady, quiet, and patient. It gives freely, forgives silently, and holds space for truth to reveal itself. Ariana never realized the role my father had played, and perhaps she never will. She never knew that her comfort, her luxuries, had been a mirror held up to her own heart. She never saw that the world doesn't owe anyone validation, and that the heart's worth can't be measured by money. And in a way, that was enough. Life has a way of teaching lessons gently, leaving echoes that linger long after the moment has passed. For me, the lessons were clear. I found peace not through confrontation, not through anger or dramatic revelation, but by simply observing, understanding, and letting reality speak. I discovered that dignity, patience, and quiet strength are more powerful than any display of force or revenge. Mr. Charles once told me, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." I understand now what he meant. The truth doesn't need to be shouted. It doesn't need to be explained. It exists, quietly, and it reveals itself to those willing to see. I also realized the importance of letting go. Holding on to someone who doesn't value you for your heart only diminishes your own spirit. Releasing that attachment doesn't mean giving up on love, it means making space for the kind of love that truly sees you, honors you, and values you wholly. And so, I live differently now. I cherish small moments. The warmth of sunlight on a quiet street, the laughter of friends, the aroma of fresh coffee in the morning, and the comforting rhythm of rain against the window. These are the things that matter. These are the things that remind me that life, when lived with integrity and heart, is rich in ways money can never measure. I don't carry anger. I don't carry regret. I carry understanding, empathy, and the gentle certainty that some lessons, though painful, are necessary. Some hearts, though blind in the moment, eventually see or at least leave a space for those who do. And in the end, I've come to a quiet realization. Wealth may buy comfort, status, or convenience, but it cannot buy love, character, or the worth of a genuine heart. The lessons we learn in love, patience, and integrity are priceless. So, if there's one thought I wish to leave, it's this. In the end, wealth can't measure the worth of love. And with that understanding, I finally rest easy, knowing that truth, patience, and quiet dignity are always enough.